Welcome to The Explainer. Sometimes history is just way more brutal and way stranger than anything you could make up. Today, we've got a story exactly like that. It's about a noblewoman who had everything taken from her and then just unleashed hell on the high seas for 13 straight years.
So that's the big question, right? How does that even happen? This is the story of Jeanne de Clisson. It's a journey from a life of total privilege to a devastating reign of terror, and it's all about revenge. So in the 14th century, they called her the Lioness of Brittany. But to really get how she earned a nickname like that, you have to know that her story doesn't start on the deck of a pirate ship. No, it starts in the super wealthy, powerful halls of the French aristocracy. She was Jeanne de Belleville, and she was a big deal. All right, let's set the stage. We're talking about a power couple here. Jeanne was born way back in 1300 into the French nobility. And for a woman in her position back then, life was basically a high-stakes chess game. It was all about making strategic marriages and alliances to grab more land, more wealth, and more power. And she played that game well. In 1330, she married a super wealthy lord named Olivier IV de Clisson. Now, this was her third marriage, and it was the big one. Think of it less like a wedding and more like a corporate merger. They weren't just uniting two people. They were combining two massive family fortunes, their lands, and all their political clout. But here's the thing. All that power made them a huge target. Look at this map. Their lands were right on this really unstable border between the Duchy of Brittany and the Kingdom of France. They were basically sitting on a political fault line, and a massive earthquake was about to hit. And that earthquake was the Breton War of Succession. So what does that mean? Well, it was basically a proxy war. You had England backing one guy to rule Brittany and France backing another. The whole region just became a giant battleground. And this war, this is what's going to completely wreck Jeanne's life and, ironically, create the legend of the Lioness. Okay, so here's how it all went down. In 1342, Olivier gets captured by the English while defending a city. But then, he gets released for a ransom that was suspiciously low. This made the French king, Philip VI, raise an eyebrow. He thought something fishy was going on. So a little later, there's a truce, and Olivier gets invited to a friendly tournament in French territory. Spoiler alert, it was not friendly, it was a trap. The second he arrived, he was arrested for treason. And then on August 2nd, 1343, they executed him. Just like that. And this sent shockwaves through the French nobility. I mean, there was no trial, no evidence shown to the public, just a swift, brutal beheading. You just didn't do that to a guy of his status. But the king wasn't done twisting the knife. To really make an example out of Olivier, his body was publicly desecrated. And his head was sent back to Nantes to be stuck on a lance above the city gates. This was a massive insult. That kind of treatment was for common criminals, not a powerful lord. It was the ultimate dishonor.
So you can imagine, for Jane, this wasn't just some political move. This was cold-blooded murder. The execution, the public humiliation of her husband, it lit a fire inside her, a fire for revenge that would basically consume the rest of her life.
And what she did next is just chilling. Filled with this mix of grief and pure rage, she decided it was time to teach her young sons a lesson they would never, ever forget. She took her two boys, Olivier and Guillaume, right to the city gate to see their father's severed head impaled on a pike. Standing right there, in front of that absolutely horrific sight, she made a vow. She swore that she would get her revenge on King Philip and his buddy Charles de Blois, and that she would stop at nothing. And let me tell you, Jeanne was not messing around. She immediately began to turn her grief into action. She sold off all her remaining lands, cashed in everything she had, and used all that money to fund her own private war. She put together a force of about 400 loyal men and bought 3 warships. And this is where the legend really takes off. They say she had the hulls painted jet black and the sails dyed blood red. She named her flagship, and you gotta love this, My Revenge. Then she made a deal with the enemies of France, the English, and for the next 13 years, she became the terror of the English Channel. So her strategy was actually pretty smart. It's called commerce raiding. Basically, she didn't try to take on the French Navy head-to-head. That would be suicide. Instead, she hunted French merchant ships, the ones carrying supplies and money. The goal was to disrupt the king's trade, mess up his logistics, and just generally spread panic. And she was absolutely brutal. Her crews would swarm a French ship and just slaughter almost everyone on board. No mercy. But, and this is key, she would always leave 1 or 2 sailors alive. Why? So they could go back and deliver a message to the French king. The Lioness of Brittany sends her regards. But this war of hers came with a terrible, terrible price. At one point, her flagship was actually sunk. She managed to escape on a small boat with her 2 sons, but they were adrift at sea for 5 agonizing days. And during that time, her younger son, Guillaume, died from exposure, right there in her arms. So, after more than a decade of this brutal campaign, Jeanne eventually retired. She married an English nobleman and settled down. Her war was over. But her story, her legend, was really just getting started. Okay, so this is where we have to ask, how much of this is real? I mean, black ships with blood-red sails? It sounds like something out of a movie. And yes, some of those details might be legendary, but the core of the story, it's absolutely true. We have actual historical proof. There's a French court judgment calling her a traitor. There are English records giving her money as an ally. Her name is even in the official Truce of Calais. The Lioness of Brittany was 100% real. And maybe nothing shows the crazy contrast of her life better than this. This is a page from the Belleville Breviary. It's an incredibly beautiful, detailed prayer book that was made just for her, probably as a wedding gift. It's a reminder of her first life as this wealthy, religious noblewoman, which is just a world away from the brutal pirate queen she became. Jeanne de Clisson died in 1359, but her story absolutely lives on. Even today, she's remembered in France. There are actually streets named after her. Rue Jean le Corsaire, which means Jean the Privateer. It's pretty amazing, right?
And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? How do we remember her? Was she a grieving widow just trying to get justice? Was she a freedom fighter in a brutal war? Or was she just a merciless terrorist who went way too far? Her story just shows how incredibly thin that line between justice and revenge can be. It really makes you wonder, when everything you love is stripped away, what are you capable of? What would any of us do if we were pushed that far?